I used my pencil to fix something for my daughter the other day. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you, felt pretty good because she was like, Dad, what's that?
Father of the Year moment.
Let's not get crazy. But it was the pencil, for people who don't know, is a little USB powered electric soldering iron. Usually, like I use it for small work, usually because I have a fairly fine point on it. But she had a piece of jewelry that needed to be soldered closed, basically. The link had broken. I was like, I can do this. And I grabbed it off my desk and I just plugged it into the USB. And she's like, wait, is that a USB thing? And I was like, yeah. She was like, huh. And then I started working on it and she was like, that is really cool. How are you melting the metal? I was like, it is insanely hot. And we talked about soldering, went through the whole thing. So anyway, fast forward a few days and we're going to Maker Faire because we went to Maker Faire yesterday. Bay Area Maker Faire. If you're listening on Sunday morning, you can still go.
There's still time.
Get in the car, drive over to Vallejo. We're going to talk about it a little bit, but it's a great event. This is her probably 6th or 7th Maker Faire because they didn't have them during the pandemic for a couple of years, but she's been every year since she was like 3. Every year I've been like, hey, do you want to learn how to solder? It's like you're melting metal, you're gluing metal together. And she's like, oh, no, I'm good, Dad. And this year we walked by the Learn to Solder tent and I was like, hey, do you want to learn to solder? And she's like, yeah, let's learn to solder. But let's not do it here. Just why don't we get one of the kits and take it home and you can teach me at home sometime with that thing that you fixed my thing with the other day. I was like, heck yeah.
The time has come.
Yeah.
I'm picturing now a very practical dad pocket protector that you could walk around with at all times with the pine sol and like a Tide pen, just both in the pocket, ready to go for emergencies.
Look, if you think I even know how to use a Tide pen, Wes, you are wildly mistaken.
I feel like your daughter would probably be capable of using the Tide pen. You just, keep it on your person so that when she needs it.
My wife had COVID a couple weeks ago, so I got to do a lot more laundry than I usually just do my stuff. And I got to do everything for a couple of weeks. And she has this stuff called, it's like Granny something's miracle stain remover. And it's just this gel that you smear on whatever you want the stain to go away from. And sometimes you have to do it twice, like through the wash twice. But it took out everything, man. It took out grass. It took out grease. It took out like black, gnarly shit from the shop. It was crazy. It was really good.
I feel like your product has to be good if you're invoking granny power. Like that is like a dark art that, if you're lying about that, people are going to come for you because like grannies are powerful stuff, Granny Smith apple. Like you can't just bite into one of those and be like, that's a mild apple. Like that shit punches you in the face.
Welcome to Brad and Will Made a Tech Pod. I'm Will, and joining us today,
I'm Wes.
Wes is our substitute Brad for the week. Brad is on his way back from North Carolina now, finally. So I think his folks got power, and what my guess is, let's see. I think next week is supposed to be our Q&A episode, but my guess is we're going to talk about North Carolina some next week. So.
Yeah, I'm your substitute, Brad. I'm your substitute Southerner. I'm maybe the only Tech Pod regular who's also a transplant from the South, like you and Brad.
So Adam Patrick Murray has moved around a lot as a youth, and I think he spent some time in Texas. But I don't really like. It is Southern, but it feels like its own separate subset of the South as somebody from Tennessee.
That's its own South for sure. Yeah. I was actually in Georgia when the big hurricane passed through, but we, unlike North Carolina, we were very fortunate that it kind of just went overhead and, took some trees out, but like nothing catastrophic, at least in like central and northern Georgia. But obviously North Carolina got it real bad. Yeah,
it's still, it still seems awful. And it seems like it's going to be a repair process of months or years, even in some cases. So anyway, we'll hear about that next week. This week, we got a twofer for you because Wes and I were talking about things we could talk about on a podcast. And we realized that Windows 24 H2 is out now for a lot of people, but not a lot of other people. I have a computer still on 22 H2 back behind me right now. And we'll talk about that later.
This is the classic Windows thing, right? There's an update out there in the world. A lot of people probably don't even know if they have the update because it's not really that obvious. Like you can find out in Windows, but it doesn't just tell you in, big bold letters, here's the version of Windows you're on.
If you right click the start menu and go to System, then it's down there under Windows specifications. It'll say Edition, Windows 11 Pro or Home, version 23H2 is what this computer's on. And we should just talk about this. Why do you sometimes not get a Windows update, Wes? Have you had them explain this dark magic to you before?
I know in general they'll do phased rollouts to make sure updates aren't going apocalyptically bad, because there have been many Windows updates in the past that have just borked a ton of people's computers when they rolled out, right? But I can't say I know like all the minutia of system compatibility and their sort of, selection matrix for like who gets stuff first. I mean, I don't have this update yet, and I'm on the Windows Insider beta tier. So I'm not there's like Canary and Dev tiers, which are like super bleeding edge, right? Yeah. But I'm on the tier that comes before like release candidate. But it hasn't pushed it to me, and I'm on a fairly modern system. So
they have a bunch of criteria for when you get them. They're even all the way down to things like, have you pressed the check for updates button lately? Because like they assume if people press the check for updates button, that means they're more interested in getting early access to stuff.
Yep.
But since they went to the Dev Canary beta live rings on that Insider, like there's basically 4 different rings, really 3, because most people shouldn't run Dev. It's Canary, beta, and live basically now. And the idea is that the Canary gets stuff before it's really tested. It just rolls out everything to everyone. The beta is stuff that's been tested and profiled. And what they do is they build a profile of your machine. So they look at like your driver ecosystem and what hardware is on your machine, and they detect when there's problems on Canary machines with specific drivers and specific hardware and stuff that's supported or unsupported or whatever. Mm-hmm. And then they flag machines that have similar configurations, and they don't dole it out to you until those configurations are resolved. So, for example, my streaming machine behind me has a couple of Blackmagic video capture cards in it, and I haven't updated the video card driver in like 5 years probably. Or the video capture driver in 5 years, and it's not going to give me 23H2 until I update the video capture driver for those Blackmagic cards. And like this is a good thing. Like this isn't. It seems like if you're a computer nerd and you like playing with the latest version of the OS, it's annoying. There's ways around it.
Yeah, you can always do a manual install, right? But I'm trying to decide: should I feel like Microsoft is protecting me or judging me for my driver and hardware situation?
I feel like this is look, Microsoft has 1 billion people using computers, so they err on the side of protection. That's why they do annoying things like when you install Windows, it says, hey, we're going to just store everything in OneDrive, in your OneDrive folder, your documents, your desktop, your video, it's all on OneDrive. And it has a convenient side effect of like them saying, hey man, you're out of OneDrive space. You got to pony up some money for us.
$5 a month. It'll be great.
Yeah. But the real thing is, like 99.9% of people who are using computers don't know how to back shit up, and saving their important stuff in OneDrive saves them a lot of hassle when they lose their laptop or smash the screen or something. So, like it's that you just assume that Microsoft is always going to err on the side of helping people who don't understand what a computer is have a better time. And that's what this is. Right. And
they got to that practice the hard way. Like I was saying back I feel like in the Windows 7 era and before, especially, there would just be so many Windows updates where people would be like, great, it completely, broke my installation. I have to reinstall now because of this update.
Well, and having that testing infrastructure is really good. So, okay, so that's part one of the topher. The other thing is my wife last week was like, hey, it's Maker Faire week. As we were talking about setting this up, I was like, oh, crap, I forgot it was Maker Faire week. That's awesome. So we trucked it down for a school field trip yesterday and went to Maker Faire and got to explore the kind of preview VIP day / school field trip day of the Bay Area Maker Faire, which, like I said, if you're listening to on Sunday morning on right now, you can turn off the podcast. Okay. Go to, I think it's makerfaire.com, buy some tickets, go down there, take the fam. It's a great day. It's like 4 or 5 hours of really good stuff to see. And then you can get look, you can get fried shit with cheese if you want some fair food. They got it all.
Funnel cake.
They didn't have funnel cakes. I was kind of
what?
No, but so there was a cookie bakery that was there that's like the brown buttered bakery, I think is what it's called, that made, we got some bomb snickerdoodles.
Okay. Acceptable.
And there was a waffle cookie place there that was like, they were like big, thick cookies, but no funnel cakes. That was a letdown. They had shawarma, but no paella. That's the other Maker Faire classic from the San Mateo Maker Faire days. That
I feel like paella is a bit of a gambit. I don't know. I've had paella in Barcelona. It was okay.
Well, okay.
It was okay. It wasn't worth it, honestly. Paella, I feel like is a dicey dish.
For me in fair food times, paella is like, you're like, oh yeah, paella, I'm gonna get it. It's like the healthy option. It's the thing that's not fried. So anyway,
it sounds great. I just feel so often let down. But yeah, what are we doing first? We doing Windows first?
Let's do Windows first, because I think it's pretty straightforward. This one feels like a big update. This is so that Microsoft does theoretically two Windows updates a year, and there's like a big one in the fall and a smaller one in the spring.
Yeah, this is the one that people were actually saying there was some kind of a bit of buzz beforehand that they might actually launch this one as Windows 12, or like at some point it seemed like there was a possibility they were going to do that. And obviously they didn't go that way.
Yeah. But yeah, it feels like a big update. They've done some significant kernel stuff. They've rewritten nerds. Hey, but shout out for all the nerds. Usually we leave the nerdy shit till the end, but here we go.
Dive it in.
Yeah, they rewrote some of the Windows kernel in Rust, specifically stuff that handles high security threat issues, like font handling. Oddly, is a place where people get in trouble. Couple other things, and they described it as their first kind of dip into, hey, how does this Rust thing work inside an enormous software generation organism like Microsoft? And which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, that's really cool. The one project that I really know anything about that's written in Rust is Ruffle, which is the Flash emulator for browsers primarily. And I've talked to some of the people who worked on Ruffle, and they've kind of described, like, why would you write this in Rust? And the reason they did it at the time was just it was a new programming language people were excited about, and so that was kind of a way to draw people to the project and like learn a new language. But another part of it was that it was a very safe language to write in, just kind of the way the language was structured. So that seems like a good thing for the kernel of Windows, which is used by a few billion people.
Yeah. So that's the one big giant nerdy thing. The AMD. The other one is that AMD and Microsoft have been working together for a long time to fix some Ryzen perf problems around branch prediction. So there's an update. It's also available for 23H2 now if you're on 23H2 and have a Zen 3, 4, or 5, which are Ryzen 5000, 7000, 9000, and then also the even numbers in between those if you're on a laptop. But it'll do like a 10% perf boost in some games, and that's just baked into 24H2 now. You can get it on 23H2 in an optional update. It'll be like KB. I actually meant to pull this out and I didn't grab it, but there's a knowledge base that's, if you search for AMD branch prediction optimization knowledge base, it takes you right there.
Yeah, this was what people were really bummed with the 9000 series performance, right? And this is not a night and day makeover, but it is a significant little bump to how well those chips are doing.
10% is nothing to sneeze at. The secret is you also get it on the older chips too.
Yeah.
Less so on the 3 series, the Zen 3s, more on the 7s do pretty well though. Phone Link. Everybody, do you use Phone Link, Wes?
So I set it up a few months ago. So I've been using a phone as my webcam for years. Like I was using an old Pixel phone, and more recently I'm using like an iPhone, like a modern iPhone that is no longer my dedicated webcam. I just like hook it up when I need it, basically. And I was using that through a couple different programs that were fine, but weren't like my favorite bits of software to use. And when I saw Phone Link was offering the ability to do the webcam connectivity, I was like, that's great. I'll install that. And I think that was actually part of the reason I upgraded to Windows 11, even when I built a new system a couple of years ago, and installed Phone Link, got it hooked up with my old Pixel camera and it just didn't recognize that the phone had a webcam or wouldn't offer me that feature.
Oh,
and so then I installed I was like, oh, it's a Pixel 3. Maybe the version of Android's too old. There wasn't really great documentation out there. So I installed like a newer version of Android on the phone, like a custom one, because Google doesn't support it anymore, and it still didn't work. And so that was the last that I attempted to use Phone Link. So in theory, seems like cool software, but it didn't do the one thing I wanted it to.
So it's funny. I've never used the video camera thing because I have webcams out the wazoo here, but the like good, decent cameras. But the thing I use it for is getting texts on my Windows PC, because like if you use a Mac for work and you have an iPhone, your messages just show up everywhere. It's really nice.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's look, I got addicted to that, and then things would happen. Like my partner would send me a text message and be like, "Hey, can you click this? Can you go here?" And it's like clearly a thing I need to do in the desktop, but then it's like, okay, I have a Discord channel that I'm going to share this to myself with from my phone so that I can then open it on my desktop. And it's like a 3-step process. It's kind of a pain in the ass.
Yeah. So you can get messages through Phone Link, right? I use Google's messages for web, the like Android browser thing. Oh, you're an Android
person.
So I have an Android and an iPhone, but like primarily one's the work phone, but like Android is my like 90% usage. And I'm curious now to see with this new version of Phone Link, if it's a better experience than having the messages for web like tab in my browser.
Yeah, my bet is that they end up being equivalent. So the upshot is, if you're on Android, the Phone Link is now in the start menu. It's just like on the right side of the start menu when you open up the start menu when your phone's connected, and it tells you like what your battery is. It lets you control your media player. It gives you your most recent notifications and calls, stuff like that. I don't think. On iOS, it's still using the old interface for right now. The change is coming soon. I don't think they fixed the problem with iOS where you only see non-group messages. So on iOS, you can reply to text messages. You see everything, but you can't reply to group messages on the Windows machine.
So if it's an iMessage individual message, it comes through, but not an iMessage group.
Yeah, or a mixed iMessage, SMS, RMS group. Yeah.
Interesting.
The group message comes through. I'm going to go look now, because this is like, it looks like, well, I don't have a group text that's gone in a while. So
I'm very curious to see how this new version of Phone Link plays with the new version of iOS, which now supports the RCS messaging, depending on your carrier. Like we've hit several potential variables here that could make it really nice to have this always connected to your PC, or really messy potentially.
Well, so the Phone Link thing connects with Bluetooth to your phone. So it uses it shows up just like it does in your car head unit. If your head unit notifies you of SMS messages, it works just like that. And I haven't had any problems with RMS, SMS kind of weirdness, aside from the standard, hey, group messages are janky on this. Yeah. But the rest is pretty good. You also see your phone notifications, and Windows gives you control over filtering out the ones that you don't need to see. So like, it's kind of nice because I get the doorbell notification on my PC now. And I get the washing machine notification on my PC now, and I need to go change the laundry. So anyway, Phone Link, I'm excited to see what that looks like. They've added a thing called energy saver mode, which I think I'm going to say that this works the way I think most people thought that the battery saver mode always worked, but it has not. So one of the things that changes in 24H2 is that a lot of the things that used to be in, you know how Windows has two control panels? It has the old school control panel, and then it also has the new settings app.
I think they finally got rid of the old school control panel, right?
It's still there. It's still there.
Oh my God. They can't kill it. It's immortal.
Yeah. There's still, like, if you want to adjust your path, you still got to go to that. If you want to put new things in your path, you got to go there. But they moved a lot more of the power stuff out of the old place and into the new place. And they added this thing called energy saver mode, which seems specifically built for people that have processors that have, like, let's say you have a newer Intel machine that has both performance cores and efficient cores. It's more intelligently able to dump stuff over to the efficient cores when it's running in the background and stuff now, based on a setting in this tab. So, for example, I was testing a Lunar Lake laptop the other day, which is Intel's new disaggregated mobile architecture. That means multiple chips inside the CPU package.
really killer battery efficiency in these things, right?
It's like the breakdown, having sat through all the reviews of these now, talked to Gordon over at PC World a lot about this, is it seems like the AMD option is the performant option. The Intel option is like the good battery life option and still decent performance, but just like a little bit slower.
Mm-hmm.
And the Qualcomm Snapdragon stuff is just like, if you want to roll out a corporate fleet that can't do anything but the things that you want to tell them to do, go nuts.
Yeah.
But maybe
you
don't
can use these 6 applications really well.
It's more than that, but I joked about it a couple times on the podcast when they were doing the Computex presentation and they were like, hey man, we've tested 1,200 games on these. I was like, tested 1,200 games is different than, hey, there are 1,200 games playable on this.
Right.
And that turned out to be the case. Anyway, the point is, like, it knows, the Windows can tell if you have like an OLED screen, and the energy saver mode will say, hey, do you want to use dark mode? It will make your battery life better, without explaining why or any of the other stuff. But it's like, it makes sense, right? Because OLEDs, obviously, there's no backlight. It only dark pixels don't use as much energy as light pixels on OLEDs.
Yes.
It also reduces the power consumption from background tasks, either by dumping them off to the E cores or by putting them on slower running cores on like a Ryzen. It'll just put them on the slow cores, which is nice. Now, it's a little janky. When I was doing some testing on it the other day, I saw some real weird performance stuff where like the stuff running on P cores just never throttled up. So I was running a benchmark that normally takes about 5 minutes and was taking 40 minutes because the CPU was running at 800 megahertz. So
ideal.
Yeah, not ideal. Maybe use that on mobile. I would say probably don't use that on desktop at this point.
That feels like a pretty good answer to my thing I was just thinking about, which was like, how much, we've got these kind of brand new PC processor architectures landing now. Like, it really feels like the dynamic is changing, especially for laptop stuff. And I was thinking, how much headroom is there going to be on the OS or like software side to optimize for this new hardware, right? Like, how much more efficiency can we get just from making Windows, tailor built for something like Lunar Lake or AMD's new chips or Snapdragon? And it sounds like maybe there's a lot of room to dial in how these things are interlinked.
I'm going to go and tell you, I hooked it up to the watt meter and I watched the CPU just run at the idle power draw for 40 minutes to do a 5-minute benchmark. It was amazing, but also not a desired outcome, right?
Right.
I think the change here that's good is that they're giving users control over this stuff, so you can bump it up automatically. The next step is like when game mode turns on, it should jump it up to the performance mode, right?
Right.
Stuff like that. And like this is an example of the convergence of like desktop OSs and mobile OSs actually making desktop OSs better, because this is something that mobile OSs just kind of inherently have known how to do since the beginning.
Yeah, it turns out that the real like learnings there were about how to work with the hardware and not just like, we should make everything for touchscreens.
Yeah. Well, and so the other thing that's happened with Microsoft that like they're finally, like the example of the branch prediction thing for AMD, that took a long time because it's like kernel level changes, and you don't just write kernel patches for the Windows kernel. It turns out if you're a vendor, like you could, Linux, no problem. But this is taking advantage of these newer processors. Microsoft was excited about the Copilot Plus stuff. I bet this was probably the conversation that happened as a result of, hey, we want you to build a bunch of Copilot Plus PC compatible processors. And the vendors were like, hey, you got to support this stuff we've had in here for a long time now, because you're kind of hosing us on battery, guys.
Yeah.
Anyway, speaking of Copilot.
Oh, must we?
Okay.
No, we should.
It's a button on the taskbar, just like any other app, and you can just right click on it and go to well, you have to go to the start menu to right click on it and go to uninstall, but you're able to do that. I haven't actually done it yet to know if it works, because I'm using the machines that have 24H2 on them. I'm using for testing, and I don't want to jack it up if I need to test Copilot Plus stuff. And I don't want to have to reinstall Windows to get it back if they've messed something up in a tragic and hilarious way. there was a bunch of stuff. It's funny, while we were setting up for this, I went back and read a bunch of previews that they did like 4 months ago of 24H2 to see what stuff actually shipped and is in with a Copilot Plus laptop sitting on my lap testing stuff. And there's some stuff like, hey, you can tap the Copilot button while you're in the Windows snipping tool after you've grabbed a snip and get it to do things like describe the picture or blur out the background. And none of that stuff's in there.
And you have a appropriately powerful NPU that would, unlock all of the features it can supposedly use.
I'm sitting here. PC World loaned me a MSI laptop. I don't know if I'm supposed to talk about which one this is yet because it might be embargoed still. But it's a Copilot Plus NPU powered Lunar Lake laptop, and it does the Copilot Plus stuff, but it doesn't do a lot of the stuff that was at. Now, in fairness, it's not stuff that Microsoft is saying now that it's doing. This is all stuff from like third-party write-ups of what's coming in 24H2, which is subject to change, but yada yada. But it's interesting.
To some extent, it feels like the story of this. I mean, obviously AI stuff in general is a story of this year in tech and probably next year in tech. But this just reminds me of how many of the things Apple was showing at their event a few weeks ago from iOS 18 were like asterisk coming later, right? They're like, it's going to do all these AI things eventually.
Well, and the weird thing about the Apple thing is usually there's like one feature that's coming later. That's like like, hey, new Photos app coming this fall.
Right.
This year it was like everything that we talked about coming this fall.
Yeah.
The double press on the button coming this anyway. So this one is I'm starting to come around a little tiny bit on the Copilot Plus stuff. On some of it. I talk to a lot of programmers in my day to day, and a lot of programmers really love Copilot Plus for like, hey, generate the framework of a Python app that does this, and then it just does that, and you go. And I think that's the Copilot Plus that's part of GitHub or Copilot that's part of GitHub because Microsoft is just calling everything that's AI related at all Copilot at this point. It's a little confusing.
Yeah, that's not going to be a problem long term.
Probably not. But anyway, the fact that you don't have to go through a bunch of registry bullshit and all that to get rid of it is a big improvement, honestly, because a lot of people just don't want it, which I get.
So as a like Windows assistant, how does it kind of fare against, they had Cortana before, right? And they sunset or Cortana, sent her off into space, and they've replaced her with Copilot.
There's a word for that, isn't it? Didn't she go rampant? That's what happens to AIs.
If only the Windows Cortana had gone rampant and then infected a billion computers. What a story that would be.
Arguably.
But yeah, so she's gone, right? And
fired into the sun.
How does Copilot do the kind of stuff that she was doing before? Did you even use Cortana? I was not really a Cortana user.
I did not use Cortana because I don't want to talk to about Windows ever. But you could do stuff like turn off your computer with your voice, which was fun because you could walk into somebody's office and yell, "Hey, Cortana, turn off my computer." And then everybody's computer would turn off, which was always hilarious. They've oddly enough with 24H2, they've pulled all of the Windows control out. Like with 23H2 and Copilot Plus, you could like change to dark mode. But now all of that stuff is gone. You can still talk to it. You can still do voice commands, but it's more like, hey, I need you to summarize this picture. And it's like, hey, you got to give me the picture. It doesn't even really look at your screen, which is one of the big things that they were kind of selling as, hey, this is a useful thing you can do. I feel like maybe that you're looking at the screen and parsing out what's happening is maybe the hard part of this whole thing because Apple's having similar issues.
I mean, does it feel like just ChatGPT integrated into Windows, basically?
I mean, imagine a ChatGPT that spent a lot of time training under Bing.
Oh my God. Let's figure out how we can make ChatGPT more depressing. What a perfect summary.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'm not going to. The place I used it that was really good was when I was asking it for how to do stuff in Windows. When I wanted to know how to do like a background blur in the snipping tool, it was like, no, you can't do that. So like, that's pretty good. It told me which settings to go to find specific things and how to turn some stuff on. It told me how to turn on some phone link stuff when I was trying to experiment with some stuff. So like maybe instead of going to the knowledge base and searching for your answers and talking to Microsoft certified advisors, you can just ask Copilot for how to fix your janky Windows install.
I guess this isn't technically Copilot, but they've added quite a few AI features into some of the core apps, like Photos, right? So you can do, your background replacement, circle something to delete it from a picture, and like upscaling and all that, right? Have you messed with any of that stuff much?
I haven't spent a lot of time with that stuff yet. I just got the laptop the other day, so it's been a little. I haven't had a lot of time with it, but that stuff's also only tied to Copilot Plus PCs. So even if you have, so that means it's a PC with a brand new CPU in it, probably a mobile PC, and it has to have an NPU that's capable of 50 tops or more. And it basically means you've bought either a Lunar Lake, Core Ultra 2 Intel machine, a Snapdragon Elite X machine, or a Ryzen AI machine. Which means,
is it 40 tops? Maybe
I thought it was 50. Maybe it's 40.
I think it's 40, but it's also, I don't know. Tops feels like yet another made up statistic or spec to me. So
I used to collect the basketball cards, so it's probably still good. There are a bunch of Copilot Plus PC changes in 24H2, including recall is turned on. That's the thing where it used to take unencrypted screenshots of your desktop and save them and then look at them so you could search for things that you'd looked at in the past. I'm turning this off, dog. It's still a bad idea. I think they've fixed some of the security problems. Like I would not use this.
Yeah, it does sound like they fixed fundamentally it does not work in the wildly insecure way that it did before, which is good. But it feels like fundamentally they fixed the glaring security flaw with the way they had designed recall, and it's better now, but it feels like they've lost the trust on this thing. And I haven't seen anything from Microsoft that's really convincingly, making the case for like, hey, it's totally better now. And we're so sorry that we thought we should do it this other way. That was, so stupid, our bad. Like, please trust us and give recall a try. Like, I just don't see the pitch for this thing really manifesting. They just sort of like went back and kind of quietly made it a little bit less horrifying.
Well, okay. So there's two things. One is I want to see an independent security audit by somebody who has access to this on one of these Copilot Plus machines. The part of the early problem was that you can't run it on a, like the other Copilot Plus stuff. You can't run it on a desktop machine. I think people figured out how to actually run on a desktop machine that had an actual GPU in it for the neural processing stuff, but it's not like the hardware is new enough that not everybody has it, right?
Yeah.
I'm opening this up. I'm going to go on this laptop. I want to see if it's on. It's supposed to be off by default. I think that's a vendor specific choice though, so the vendors can choose probably to turn it on, would be my guess.
The one thing about recall that does seem appealing to me, though, I kind of struggle to think of use cases where I would want to scrub back through what I was doing a month ago with any kind of specificity. But I do like the idea of being able to use AI for like the natural language recognition of not just having to search for a file and being like, oh, I guess I didn't name that picture red wheelbarrow.jpg. Like, how am I going to ever find it? But being able to type in red wheelbarrow and Windows recall being able to look through your history and like recognize an image of a wheelbarrow and, pull it up for me, right? Like that in sort of the broad strokes is an appealing concept, but I don't really see the practical use case for this thing. Maybe it's one of those things where just once you have it as part of your daily life and you can scrub back through stuff you were doing and you realize all of the uses for it, but it doesn't, like, I'm not convinced that it's really something that I would get much value out of.
Well, so there's two things for me. One is that since it's only on Copilot Plus PCs for right now, and my desktop PC is not a Copilot Plus PC, but my laptop is, and I do 95% of my computing on my desktop PC, the place that it's valuable is not the place where it lives, right? That's the fundamental practical problem. The other big issue is that I don't want to have like, hey, Wes, can I come over to your house to watch the football game? Oh yeah, sure. Hey, I want to use your computer to look something up real quick. My phone's not working. Your cell signal is bad in your neighborhood. Oh, okay. Hey, Copilot Plus, what's my checking account number? And then it just pulls up the checking account number, right? Like it's like it's just exposing yourself to an enormous threat surface for no reason. This is why I want to see the independent security audit from people who actually are good at this stuff to figure out where it is. And I looked for one before we started the show. I haven't seen anybody do one yet, but I would hope that Microsoft would be seeding this with people who are incredibly skeptical to get them to say, hey, here's what the problem is. Again, with this, I think it's a 99. I think this is a feature for the 99% of normal people who don't think about this stuff probably, but it also still feels irresponsible for them to roll out.
Yeah, I mean, that arguably makes it worse to me, right? Because the idea, one of the things they did to solve the security complaints, or not solve, but address the security complaints, was you can just like blanket, I guess you would call it, blacklisting like apps and like things in Windows that you don't want it to record, right?
Yeah,
so you
disallow.
Can be like, disallow. So like by default, it won't record like a private browsing session. But obviously we don't all open a private browser every time we're going to our bank. You know,
I never do, because I don't want to have to log. I want cookies. I want the cookie to be there for that. Yeah. And
so you can, maybe there's some degree of granularity there for what you can say, don't record this site, or don't record, I use Firefox for all of my banking stuff, so don't record Firefox. But then if we're going back to what you're saying, is like, this feels like something pitched to normal people who would just find it convenient. Normal people who just find this convenient are not going to go into Windows Recall and customize the like 18 cases where they should probably not be letting Windows record what they're doing on their computer, right? So yeah, it still feels like a very suspect concept to me, even if they have at least gone to some lengths to make it safer.
So now the one thing I will say is I opened up this laptop and it's not actually installed on this laptop. So this is the other thing about this update, and Microsoft updates in general at this point are like this. With this update, they're able to roll out features independently of each other. So we're not necessarily like your 24H2 version and my 24H2 version might have slightly different things. You might get phone link before I do for inexplicable reasons. Which is like, it's got to be a support nightmare for them, but also it's nice that they can disconnect, say, something like Recall and hold that, and don't have to hold the entire 24H2 update because one small subset of it is broken. This is something that mobile OSs have had for a long time too.
Yeah, so we've got a fun list we can get into in a second of like the kind of little things that this update adds that people who just use computers a lot will appreciate. But I'm like left thinking about all of this AI stuff and kind of the features that they're pushing and advertising for these new Copilot Plus PCs. And like, I don't know, it all kind of feels to me like features that you see at stage keynotes that are just like destined to be removed from Windows in 2 to 5 years, just like, oh, these are the big exciting features that are going to change how everybody uses Windows. And then 5 years later, we're like, actually, we kind of still want to just use Windows more or less the way we used it 10, 20 years ago. And we don't really like this AI image generator because it kind of looks like ass. And we don't really need like AI background removal built into photos because it doesn't work that well. And you should probably use Photoshop if you're serious about editing your photos in that way. And I don't know, it just feels like there's all these little elements they're adding that are going to get quietly erased in a few years once we sort of come to the realization that like this AI stuff actually sucks. I don't know.
Wes, are you suggesting they're going to fire Copilot down the Cortana hole?
I feel like they will both be buried in the same unmarked grave at some point.
It's like Bob,
in the future.
Clippy, Cortana, Copilot.
And I could be totally wrong. Maybe all this AI stuff does get to the point where average people just like to use it day to day because it's good enough. I certainly have a distaste for it just from sort of an artistic and perspective. And, as someone who is a journalist and whose entire industry is threatened by the existence of this stuff and how bad it seems to be at its job currently.
Wes, I'm not worried about you're better than average. So using AI would bring your work down. That's the thing to remember. It reverts to mean.
I agree. And I appreciate the compliment, but at the same time, there's so many use cases. There are so many cases in the world where like people will just take good enough,
Yeah,
right?
no, I know.
And so maybe these features will hit that point of good enough and they will be a major component of Windows going forward. But I don't know, so much of it to me just makes me want to look into the versions of like tiny Windows or whatever that people are running these days, where you install a stripped down version. Or maybe I should just use Linux.
It's time to switch to Linux. If you're, and like, rather than use some bootleg ass version of Windows that somebody has done all the minifying on, just switch to Linux and that.
Look, there's a guy on YouTube named Greg, and Greg's tiny Windows. No, I'm making it Greg, but like I'm not going to install a Ghost Spectre or whatever version of bootleg Windows is out there. But I kind of want to build my own just to try it.
I just assume that anybody making a custom version of Windows has deep ties to the Russian info state, and you're causing yourself future problems. Anyway, the one thing I do want to shout out on the MSI on the NPU based laptops is they've built in the kind of video call enhancements you get with NVIDIA Broadcast and the other tools that are akin to that into the camera control panel. So you can literally when you connect a camera, when you turn on the camera on one of these Copilot Plus laptops, it pops up a thing in the notification tray that says, "Hey, do you want to enhance your video call?" And it'll do like different levels of background removal and blurring. It'll do like eye line correction, which I find fucking nightmarish, but people turn that on.
Ugh.
And then it also does like the head tracking, so it'll like follow your head, so you stay centered, even if you lean around in your chair, which is nice.
There is one kind of similar implementation that does seem like it has quite a bit of potential, which is the auto SR stuff. I don't know if you've messed with that.
The subtitle stuff, like,
right? No, so I think it's auto SR, auto super resolution. It's their version of like a DLSS or FSR, but it works a bit differently than those techniques because those are like integrated into the rendering pipeline of a game, right? Whereas auto SR is basically taking the final image. It doesn't have any sort of insight into the game's rendering process, but it's taking the final image and doing AI upscaling, which is not as good as DLSS, but has the advantage of not requiring like, custom implementation from a game developer. It's basically just turning on AI upscaling for a game on your computer. And, it should work with, basically everything as far as I understand.
Better upscaling than you're getting. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah. And like I think Digital Foundry's done some tests on it and stuff. And I think we're still early days for this thing, but like generally it's pretty good.
Okay.
So if you're on a laptop with an NPU and you're like, I don't give a shit about any of this recall stuff. Like, I don't want any of these AI features. I just like playing my games on my laptop. This could actually be a use case for the NPU on your chip. Like I was thinking about buying a new laptop and I was like a little salty that AMD put these NPUs on their chips when I'm like, they could have had some more like E-cores on there, or some
more GPU on the APU. I mean,
yeah. Exactly. So I was like, that's kind of frustrating, right? But then maybe this is a reason for the NPU to exist, and maybe this is a justification for it for people who play games on their laptops but don't care about any of this other AI stuff. So we'll see.
And the nice thing, so there's a couple other things that I've fooled with that use the NPU that are pretty good. Like there's a thing that'll basically caption any audio that's playing out of your Windows machine.
And that's great,
which is fantastic. Like even just for me, like laying in bed watching YouTube videos and not wanting to bother my wife or have to put on headphones. It's been nice for that kind of stuff. So it's also funny when you play music by accident, because it's like if you play your lo-fi ambient chill music, it's like soothing. It's like soothing electronica, with the little musical notes on the side. So anyway,
I want to play some Meatloaf on it and see if how close it gets to the lyrics.
Nope. We're not going to talk about that here. I won't do that. Let's see. Okay. So you had mentioned small, but okay. Last thing on the big points. You can get it if you hit the update button, it doesn't offer it to you. Update all your drivers first. It's better to go through Windows Update if you can than doing the manual install. I strongly advocate just waiting until Windows gives you the Windows Update and being patient and not caring about this stuff. That said, if you're on like 22H2 and you have a Ryzen 5 or a Zen 5 or Zen 4, Zen 3, Zen 4 or Zen 5, you probably want to get to 23H2 at least so you can put that update on.
Mm-hmm.
You can, once you've updated all your drivers and you press check for update again and it still doesn't give it to you, you can go get the media creation tool, make a thumb drive, put the installer on the thumb drive, plug the thumb drive into Windows, and start the install process from inside Windows. And then it'll give you the upgrade option. It's risky. It's entirely possible. Like, it's not risky that you're going to wipe out your machine or anything. Most likely backup before you do a big Windows upgrade always. But it's likely that you'll boot it up and then something won't work. Either some piece of software, some driver, some piece of hardware, some weird USB thing that you have plugged in that you completely forgot was there. Like any non-standard weird hardware, your space orb isn't going to work after this. Okay. So your mileage may vary. Okay. Let's do small but interesting things.
Yeah. First one that I'm glad to see is Windows can now zip and not just unzip 7-zip and tar files. Though after I wrote this down, I was like, when was the last time I zipped something? I unzip stuff like all the time because I'm like downloading stuff from Google Drive and unzipping it, but zipping it, it's been a minute since I've had to zip something.
I zip stuff like I'm always moving stuff around. I zipped stuff 4 or 5 times Thursday night. Like I'm zip like crazy.
That's an exciting Thursday night.
Look, man, it was. I can't talk about it right now, but it was an exciting Thursday night. I tested out a little bit of performance. I have a couple of big gnarly zip files that I use. So often if I'm sharing some sort of like Unreal bullshit, you'll zip up a folder and it'll be like 1,000 tiny little files. And if you use the default Windows zip app, that takes an hour. And if you use 7-zip, it takes like 18 seconds. So I tested it out to see if they fixed the perf stuff, because there's some really specific things that 7-zip does that make it fast. It's still slow as shit on the Windows one. So
is it like single core? What are they doing with their zipper?
The Windows zipper is single threaded, and I think it has something to do with how file access works at a like. I want to say 7-zip is looking at the file table and pulling where the files are from that rather than parsing like individual files. I don't understand what the difference is. All I know is 7-zip good, Windows zip bad, and 7-zip still buried in the secondary menu below show more things. So
isn't it amazing when a piece of freeware from 1999, it can still consistently outperform like software from the biggest company in the world?
I'm going to say that 7-zip is still under active development. They released a new version for 2 weeks ago. 8.11. So there was a new version as of like a month and a half ago.
Yeah. I mean, obviously they're keeping up with how they can use hardware, right? But like, it's just astounding that this is just a little piece of free software that can just so easily outperform forever. It has always been better than Windows built-in zip tools, right? And that's still the case, even though Windows is, has a little money behind it.
So I was at an AMD event last week, and I think some folks who are big into perf were running 7-zip. They were running a bunch of benchmarks to get some world records on some new Threadripper machines, and they were running 7-zip on 92 cores and like knocking in world record 7-zip time. So it was fun.
Awesome.
Anyway, they redesigned the context menu and put text where copy it. Like, this annoys me. I'm going to be honest. I liked the no text copy paste icons in the right click menu.
I liked them in theory, but I found them a little bit too small that I would always sort of like cut easy. Like I see the scissors, like I know cut, like easy click, but something about like, I don't know, copy and rename. Like if I look at the icons for a second, I know what they are, but I would always hesitate. Like I never built, I guess, the muscle memory for exactly where those buttons would be. I guess I've only had Windows 11 for like a year or a couple of years. But yeah, I don't know. It never quite worked for me.
So here's the thing. I don't ever use the right click menu to copy and paste because I just use the keyboard shortcuts. Right.
Well, then what do you even care about these icons for?
I use rename every single day. I rename stuff because the single click in to rename is fiddly, and I can never remember that you have to press F2 to open the rename to switch to rename mode. So, that's where I am. I just think it's goofy that you put the thing I like about them is they put the things that theoretically people use the most often at the top. I wish it was a smart menu so it would learn over time that like the thing I use most often is to right click and go down to show more options and then go to 7-zip and then go to add to archive create archive here or whatever. And like, yeah, anyway.
I mean, think about it. It feels like we're really past due for the Windows context menu to just work the way like control centers do on phones, where you can just choose what icons you show. Like, why can I not just customize my context menu without using one of these weird, registry edit, like freeware programs that have been around for ages and ages? And I don't even know how well those work with Windows 11, but like, why can't I just choose the 5 icons that go at the top or have no icons up there? Why do I have convert to Adobe PDF in my context menu when that's not a thing that I ever do,
Why can't you turn that off? Like, why? There's no easy way to turn that off. It's all anyway. Yeah, shell extensions are weird. The quick settings taskbar menu. Do you know what this is? I didn't know what this was called until I was starting to read about this.
You mean not the system tray?
Not the system tray. It's in the system tray. You access it by going to the system tray, but it's the thing you get when you click on, how like you have your system tray icons, like your microphones down there, and like I have fan control down there, so I see how hot my liquid is in my cooling loop.
Sure.
And then there's the clock with the do not disturb next to it, but the thing with the little network logo or your Wi-Fi logo and the volume and battery life, maybe if you're on a laptop.
Yeah, that's quick settings. Okay.
Yeah, that's called quick. When you click on that, you get quick settings, and it has like, hey, you can turn your Wi-Fi or Bluetooth off, airplane mode, all that stuff. It scrolls now, and you can drag and drop and move stuff around. So you can have like the things you actually use at the top, which is nice, I think.
So we can customize this, but we can't customize the right click menu that we use 7,000 times more a day than quick settings.
Mike, I would bet that right click menu is like some real ancient dark magic code from the before times. It's like somebody wrote it with like Windows NT4 or something.
That feels completely correct, because when you have to go to the old menu and with the show more options, it just feels like it shunted you back to Windows 7 era stuff, basically. Like that hasn't really changed. So it feels like they just like built a new house on top of the old house. But at any time you need to do something serious, you have to go into the old house to find your old tools.
Well, and when you have to change anything, especially on that old one, it's like you got to dig into the bits of the registry that are like run DLL semicolon 80 semicolon 42 AB, some real dark magic in there.
Yeah. The quick settings, more customizable. Woo.
Yeah, this
nice. Feels like more of a laptop thing, right? Like you can use this on desktop, but it's kind of just for the volume controls, I feel like, for the most part.
Yeah, the thing I like there is that you can change the sound output by clicking that and then right clicking the little slider doober next to the volume bar. Mm-hmm. Because I use that a lot on desktop, but that's pretty much it. Yeah. What else we got? We got unified work and personal MS Teams. Do people use? Wait. Has anyone in history ever used Teams to like, hey, honey, can you stop at the grocery store and pick up some milk and bread on the way home? No.
We're a Teams household. That's what.
Wait,
no, I'm not. I'm just saying there could be a person out there who's like, we're going to be a Teams household. That's how we're going to communicate. Me and my friends, we're not going to use Discord. We're going to use Microsoft Teams.
Look,
I don't know.
If Satya Nadella is a Teams household, I will give you $500, Wes.
Well, so the thing about this for me is I don't use Teams at work. We're on like the Google Workplace ecosystem, but occasionally I'll have meetings with like people at Microsoft or some other company that uses Teams, and they'll send me like a Teams link. And if I try to open it through the computer, through Windows, it will open like personal Teams, which is like what you get if you're just a normal person. But if you're working with a company that uses corporate Teams, it was until now, for some weird reason, corporate Teams. And so you couldn't open those meeting links in that version of Teams, which is insane. But that's how it worked for some reason.
So when I started at Stray Bombay, we used Teams because it's a Seattle company and Chet loves Microsoft. Shout out to Chet. They like, it would let you log in with the personal Teams using your Stray Stray Bombay email address, and then it'd be like, hey, you can't use this.
Yeah. What,
Like, why does it do that?
thinking? It makes no sense.
Yeah. So anyway, shout out to Microsoft for finally unifying bringing two teams together. Also, if your house runs on Teams, I would love to hear from you. Send emails to techbot@content.town. I
would like my $500, Satya Nadella. If you're listening, please.
Yeah, $500
please
to
let
Wes.
us know.
If Satya Nadella, if you have proof that Satya Nadella runs his house on Teams, Wes gets paid.
To be fair, giving Microsoft a lot of shit for this, but like Google has launched about 17 different chat applications over its lifetime. Oh yeah, none of which talk to each other. So Microsoft is still ahead of them on this front.
I still don't understand the difference between Google Chat and Duo or whatever that one was. Anyway, yeah.
I was a Google Allo household for about a year.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
And then they killed it.
If you have an HDR monitor, you can get HDR wallpapers now for Windows with 24H2. That's sick.
That's cool. Nothing to complain about there.
Yeah. Hey, Wes, how do you feel about WordPad? Do you remember WordPad?
Oh, I remember WordPad. I mean, my computer still has it because I haven't gotten 24H2 yet. They haven't taken it from me. I think some people care about WordPad. To be honest, I think of WordPad as the annoying program that I accidentally opened documents in sometimes when I either just wanted to open them in Notepad because it was just a text file, or because it was a Microsoft Word document and I didn't have Word. And then it showed up in WordPad as like garbled code or something. Yeah. Maybe they wouldn't do that with Word docs, but there's some format of document that I would open in WordPad and it would just show up as complete garbled mess. And I'd be like, why are you here then? You can't even open this document. Yeah, that's like, I would much rather have a Word document viewer than a thing that I can do a bad job. I can mess up all my Word documents formatting in with WordPad. So anyway, never forget WordPad. Sorry. Gone, forgotten. You can go down the Cortana hole too. We're putting a lot of stuff in the Cortana hole. I'm beginning to regret the phrasing on that, but we'll see how this goes. Support for new technologies like Wi-Fi 7 and USB 4 80 gigabit per second. That's nice. This is cool. Wi-Fi 7 seems very promising with I think it's called MLO, multi-link operation, to sort of bridge your connectivity across different wireless channels, right? And that's the part that's like, you could use a Wi-Fi 7 adapter, but you don't get the multi-link on previous versions of Windows. Yeah. So big speed if you have all of the gear needed for this, which no one does right now, probably. Well, we talked about this maybe a month ago when we did the Wi-Fi 7 episode. So it was our lowest viewed episode, lowest list downloaded episode that month. So people don't care about Wi-Fi 7 is the thing we learned. Not by a lot, but just by a, we should keep talking about it then. Yeah, let's move on. As an Android user, you'll probably love this. You can browse your Android phone's file system now from Windows, the thing you need to do all the time. Can I just plug my phone into the computer and do that? Look, man, I'm an iPhone person. I don't have a file system as far as I know. It's just the elves in there move things around when I want them. An actual exciting feature they added is Bluetooth Low Energy support, which is part of the Bluetooth 5.3 spec. This means people who have hearing aids can now use their hearing aids with a Windows computer. Oh, that's nice. Audio, Bluetooth LE audio. That's nice. Yes. Oh, that's awesome. It's really, really cool. So this kind of is like on the same wavelength as Apple announced that the AirPod, what tier is it of AirPods Pro that can 2. Be used? Pro 2s can be used as hearing aids, right? And I think that's because they're on the same Bluetooth spec that supports this functionality. Well, there's two parts of it. One is that, the LE lets you do a lot of audio over a long period of time without eating a lot of battery. Mm-hmm. The other part of it is that you have to talk to the FDA a lot to get over-the-counter hearing aid qualifications for your thing. Gotcha. Yeah. So this is the technical part of that equation. So if you have a pair of whatever, brand new earbuds or AirPods, they do not automatically become hearing aids, but you can use them with your Windows laptop. And if you had some hearing aids, you can use them with your Windows laptop. Well, and also Bluetooth LE has been around since 4, I think. Bluetooth 4. Mm-hmm. I think the audio spec is just it came out with 5. So yeah, I can't remember. I've literally like 3,000, 4,000 words of notes for the Bluetooth
Like we might have to just do a year of Bluetooth at this point. It's such a fucking complicated thing. I love in File Explorer you can right click and dupe a tab for File Explorer windows, which is really nice. Like tabbed browsing in the File Explorer. I wish that there was a way to just say, hey, always open new File Explorer windows in the current window. That's the one thing it's kind of missing so far.
Is there any, I'm sure with like third-party tools you can use this. Is there any just like save all your tabs and always have the same tabs open option?
That's madness, Wes. That's absolutely out of control. That would be nice though.
I guess what I'm really looking for is just like pinned tabs, you know, like every time I start my computer, realistically, I'm going to use like my downloads folder, my like PC Gamer images folder, you know, one or two like basic ones.
There's like 5 folders where most people live. It's interesting because the version of File Explorer I have on 2023H2 has the duplicate tab option in it. So, and you can middle click to just close tabs. I didn't know that. That's cool. A sudo and terminal.
Shout out to Brad. Brad would be very excited for this, right? I just run native admin all the time because I get 3% better performance across the board. I'm just admin. That's how I run Windows, baby. Sudo and terminal is good. I still feel like the Windows, like the Linuxification of the Windows terminal still is weird to me. Because like sometimes I type LS and it works, and sometimes I type dir and it works. I don't know, man. I feel like this is just a thing people will use for fun. Like you don't even need it. You'll just go in terminal and type in sudo and be like, that's cool. I'm doing Linux stuff, but it's Windows.
I wonder if this lets you run scripts that work on other OSs or something. Anyway, it's Brad will tell us if you're interested in knowing why this is exciting. Send an email to techpod@content.town. Brad and I'll talk about it next week.
Woohoo!
Let's see. We got a refresh button at the bottom of the Wi-Fi connection menu. This is the stupidest ad that they've ever had to make because it's maddening that you just can't force a refresh. But yeah, good job, I guess.
Sometimes it's nice to just have a button. It's nice to not have to open that menu, not see the Wi-Fi thing you're trying to connect to, reopen the menu, just be able to press a button. It's better.
No, it is asinine that you couldn't just press a button
beforehand.
For the 20 years that Wi-Fi has been a thing.
Yep.
Anyway, new Super Mario Brothers security defaults.
Perhaps I should have written the notes for that one slightly differently. This is another shout out to Brad. Samba security is better in Windows now by default.
Oh, okay. Like the defaults for file shares are more appropriate.
Yes. So they changed it. So let's see. By default, SMB signing is required on all connections. This is basically to stop people from like connecting to a NAS that has, I don't know, is full of viruses or something on an unsecure network. I mean, I feel like realistically TechPod listeners don't have much.
This doesn't apply.
This won't affect you. You don't have anything to gain here really, because you probably know what you're doing, but there are occasionally people who are, I guess, using Samba to connect to a NAS on a random network that they shouldn't be. So yeah, they're making that more secure, and they disabled guest fallback on Windows 11 Pro to make sure that you're not just like connecting to untrustworthy devices.
Oh, to wide open. So you don't think you're connecting to something secure that is actually just a wide open network. That's good.
Yeah. So it's sort of just like changes to the default stuff. It's not really adding new functionality. It's just making it, they're sort of updating, I guess, what was probably a very ignored part of Windows network connectivity, right?
Sense.
This is not something that Microsoft focuses on.
There's a couple of known issues. Some of the stuff may be actually fixed by the time you listen to it. The big one, I think, is the missing, you lose like 9 gigabytes, basic 8.63 gigabytes when you install Windows in place. Yep. Can you get rid of it now? Yeah.
So apparently you could always get rid of it. But when you then went into you would go into disk cleanup, remove it after you've updated. And then if you checked again, it would say it was still there. Oh. And apparently it was not still there, but it was just being reported. And so, of course, people were like, oh, my God, Windows won't let me delete this thing. It's stuck.
My 8.63 gigabytes.
Yeah. So it's all good.
Okay.
Don't worry.
Okay. Don't worry about that. That's good. and then that's the other normal list of stuff. Like there's some easy anti-cheat problems. There's blue screens with certain Western Digital SSDs. This is why if it doesn't say, hey, you should upgrade, you should not upgrade. Because if you have easy anti-cheat that's going to cause problems with your machine, it will probably prevent you from upgrading your machine. Like it won't it won't offer it to you.
And it's the Western Digital SN770 and SN850, I think, are both DRAM.
SN580.
580. And those are both DRAM-less SSDs. And apparently there was something going on with the way they were doing the caching in system memory that was just like causing a blue screen. So I'm sure they'll fix that pretty quick. But also a good reminder to maybe not buy a DRAM-less SSD.
Yeah, it seems like a mistake. And of course the sort of Damocles hanging over everyone on Windows 10's head at this point, because this has been a real boring episode, I guess, for you Windows 10 people, is that on October 15th next year, they're killing Windows 10 goes end of life. End of life.
What does that mean for... Okay, so I looked at the statistics. Apparently this year... this might be like a few months ago, but like 60% of PCs are still on Windows 10, which is not a great statistic for Windows 11, and also seemingly not a great statistic for October 15th, 2025, when Microsoft stops supporting Windows 10. So, do you think they're going to push that back?
So stop supporting means they're not going to provide updates or security updates anymore after that point. If you're a corporate customer, you can buy for X number of dollars access to ongoing support for, I think, another year. But the upshot is you're going to want to upgrade or make a change in your life after that happens, because it wasn't inexpensive. It was like $80 for the first year, and it goes up each additional year after that, presumably because they assume more people will drop off. Now, the catch is that Microsoft has some hardware requirements that mean machines from before like 2015, basically you can't upgrade without doing some hardware updates. And in some cases, not even with hardware updates. So a lot of those machines, and the bummer about this is, like, if you're just browsing the web, I put FlexOS on my old 2014 MacBook Pro and gave it to my daughter a couple years ago when she needed a laptop for school. And Chrome OS Flex is the Google version of Chromebook OS that just runs on any x86 computer, basically.
Nice.
And it's fucking awesome. It's really good. It's fast. It's like, it just runs the browser. You can do their weird app plugin browser extension things. And it's a fine computer for just doing stuff on the internet and watching YouTube and
probably still will be for several years, right?
Like the thing that's going to kill it is the battery, honestly. So we're in a situation, we talk about this on the Full Nerd over at PC World a lot, but it seems like they're going to have to blink and extend that if they don't get that number up from 60% to down from 60% to like 20%. Like, it is an enormous number of computers that they're basically going to say, hey, we're going to make a giant virus problem for everybody. Because the thing that happens when they stop doing security updates, just so people understand, is you have all of a sudden you have a computer that was fine, and then 3 months later you have a computer that you plug into the raw internet and it's compromised in like 45 seconds. So it seems bad.
Yeah, and I don't know, when they first released the requirements for Windows 11, all of the hardware requirements you're going to have, everything, I thought it was ridiculous.
The TPM and the secure boot and all that stuff. Yeah.
I mean, and I say this not as, as someone with a security background, but like, it felt like such an absurdly high bar for what the average person's computer would be capable of, that it felt like they were dooming the vast majority of PCs to not be able to upgrade to Windows 11. And they seemed like they were either, I'm sure they weren't ignorant to that, but they thought that was okay. They thought that was a good idea for their new OS. And it feels like the adoption has borne out how bad of an idea that was, and how bad of an idea everybody, all the people like us were saying, like, this seems ridiculous that they're not backing down from this. And this feels like another instance of that, being borne out, right? That like the adoption is not there for Windows 11. Are you really going to just let everybody be on a janky, unprotected old version of Windows 10 starting next year?
Well, yeah. So the gist is the TPM is basically the thing that's required. The chip that is required that's causing this problem for these older machines is like a secure store for digital keys. So it's a security thing. I think they're going to blink, or I think like sometimes you have to make difficult choices. Microsoft has typically erred on the side of remaining backwards compatible. This is the first time I ever remember them going in a big way. Like the last one was the 64-bit shift. And it's just with Windows 11 that you couldn't get a 32-bit version of the OS. There's 32-bit versions of Windows 10 out there. You have to work to find them, but like it's unusual that they're making this hard a line, and I don't exactly understand what the motivation for it is, other than it lets them do things that are secure that other important vendors probably want more than end consumers. So I don't know. I joke on the Full Nerd that this means that 2025 is finally going to be the year of Linux.
Just like last year and the year before that and the year before that. 2005
was totally the year of desktop Linux. But
I'm actually with you, though. I feel like I really want to get a framework laptop next time they put out a substantial hardware revision.
Yeah.
And I think I'm going to dual boot Windows because I probably have to have it for work and just certain things, and try to learn a distro of Linux as sort of my daily driver.
Yeah.
It just feels like it's time.
Well, I've been testing out stuff like Bazite, which is the Fedora core, the Fedora version of Fedora that includes all of Valve's Proton and playing games on Linux stuff. It also includes the SteamOS UI if you want to boot straight into that. But you can also just boot into a GNOME desktop or KDE desktop and use like a normal ass Linux computer. And like, it's not the only thing that you can't get to work are things that are intentionally not compatible with Linux because Tim Epic is pissed off at Valve's the amount of money Valve takes from game developers, right? Like it's not an issue anymore. It's much more straightforward. So anyway, I think that's pretty much it. 24H2, you maybe you can get it now. I don't know. Hit the update button and see what it says. Like I said, if you can't update your drivers, update your software, because you might have some old piece of software that's incompatible. Remove anything you don't use, and then hit the button again, see what happens, or just wait, because it doesn't matter. There's nothing in here except for that. Really, I don't think you need any of this stuff if you're not on like a brand new laptop.
Yeah. Just wait unless you're super psyched about recall, or you really need to zip up some files and you hate 7-zip for some reason.
But you're not going to get recall unless you have one of the brand new laptops that ships with it.
That's true. Yeah. That's true.
Anyway, can we talk about Maker Faire for a minute? Because it was really fun. This is a long podcast. I apologize, Wes.
It's all good for me. No, I'm feeling nostalgic just thinking about Maker Faire, because the last time I went to Maker Faire was with you and Norm we did New York Maker Faire a couple of times, but the last time I went to the one here in SF was probably like 2013 or something like that.
Was it the shawarma year?
So there was the churros Avengers year, right? And then we went at least 1 year after that.
Okay. Well, I mean, Norman, Joey, and I went every year pretty much, or Anna or whoever was our producer at the time. But
yeah. But it's been a long time for me, so I would love to hear about some Maker Faire.
So Maker Faire went away in 2020 for fairly obvious reasons. I think it was gone until last year, and then they like a month before the event or something, they were like, "Hey, we're having Maker Faire. It's going to be up on Mare Island in Vallejo," which is like an old naval shipyard refurbing base from World War II. It's where they made a bunch of ships on the West Coast in World War II.
All I know about Vallejo is I've taken the Vallejo ferry once, and it was a nice ride. And then I walked around Vallejo a little bit.
So the Mare Island is across the way from the ferry building where you get off in Vallejo. It's where the first season of the redone BattleBots that our old company worked.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, was. So they have a bunch of like big warehouses, and like it's like a cool industrial vibe up there. And so we trucked up yesterday morning. got there. It opened at 10. We went in, saw just a ton. So they have a mixture of like big Burning Man style art install stuff, like cars that shoot fire out of the top, and like big inflatable car. Like there was a it looked like an old fire truck body that had like huge nylon inflatable illuminated fins off the side, like legs. So it kind of moved like a millipede or something, but it was like 40 feet long. It had big, it was cool. It was for people who are into specific kinds of drugs. But then you also got to walk around and there were people who just made cool shit that they wanted to bring and show off, or maybe like talk to people and see if they should do a Kickstarter to make a small run of stuff or whatever. So
always that stuff was always at Maker Faire, but I imagine there's probably kind of a different, maybe not a different vibe, but like a different set of regulars now after the sort of, the COVID break, right? So I'm wondering if there's some people you see there every year doing the same stuff or coming with new stuff, and you're like, oh, I remember that person. Like they're always doing something cool.
Yeah. So yes to both of those. Like the Mentos and Coke guys are there and do a show every year. They've done a show every year forever. Adam Savage, a friend of the show, Adam Savage does his Sunday sermon on Sunday mornings.
Excellent.
Pretty much every year. I think he was out of town last year and couldn't do it last year. But anyway.
You took some notes here of things that as soon as I looked them up, I was like, this is so Maker Faire, but like not an exact thing I saw before, but I'm like, like the spirit is still very much there.
Yeah. Like the vibes are real good. And like they do a really good job of getting stuff that like is familiar and you want to see, and also stuff that's crazy and new and you've never seen before. So like, for example, I've seen a couple of these on the internet, but this is the first time I've gotten to handle one. There's a Raspberry Pi cyber deck, like a William Gibson / Neil Stephenson Snow Crash style thing that you jack your shit into.
Are we talking like briefcase size, or is it a more compact size than that?
It's like bigger than a Game Boy, but smaller than a laptop. So imagine like a portrait orientation thing with like a pretty good size hardware keyboard and like a trackpad and a gamepad stuff. And then a bunch of like different USB and HDMI ports and shit up the side. I want to say it had a serial RS-232 port on it if you want to get real old school and plug into the console.
Okay.
And then like a 4-inch screen on top. And it runs off of a Raspberry Pi compute module. I think they were saying they were doing CM4s right now because the 5 is a little bit different.
They should have hooked that shit up to like a dot matrix printer, printed out some pixel art or something.
What if you just hooked it up to a 4G modem and you have an always connected little computer that fits into like a holster on your nerd belt?
Ooh,
yeah,
okay.
It's pretty hot business. This is the company that makes this is called Clockwork. It's called the U console is the one that I got to spend a little bit of time with, and it's cool. Like it's like $169 plus the compute module, and you can do different. You can like. They I want to say they posted the designs for the cases. I might be thinking somebody else I talked to later, but so you can like print your own cases if you want to make something different.
Looks like they also sell what is basically a Game Boy case if you want to make a Pi Boy kind of system.
Yeah,
with a few extra buttons on it.
Yeah, and the people who were making it were really cool. I had a nice chat with them. There was a chocolate 3D printer called the Cocoa Press. I've seen them before. This is the second rev of this, but they were showing off their new printer. It's a lot like as the person who's working the booth said, we've gone from like 10 years behind the current state of the art for plastic 3D printers to like 5 years behind now. But basically you can print, it works like any 3D printer. It's just designed to print chocolate, and you take a tube of chocolate that's about an inch and a half around and kind of tapered on the end, and jam it in this hole. And then there's a thing that just heats it up to the right temperature and applies a little bit of pressure from the top. And you can print like, as I was walking around with my wife, she's like, man, if you had one of these, you could sell the like printing your corporate logo as a bed pillow chocolate at events and stuff. And you could just do that as all full time as a job.
Yeah. I mean, I got to say, like, not as practical as an actual 3D printer, but way more appealing to me personally.
Yeah.
Just to have permission to eat chocolate at any point in time, right? It's like, well, you printed it. You can't, like, what are you going to do? Let it go to waste? No, you gotta eat that.
Well, and plus think of how nice it would be to be able to be like, oh man, everybody's coming over to watch Iron Man tonight. Let's print a bunch of little Iron Mens and then we can eat him.
Heck yeah.
What the
Always
people,
wanted to eat Iron Man.
Yeah, it's what the people crave. That's a Cocoa Press. I think it's about $1,500. And the thing I wish I had asked, I didn't ask, is if there's a way for you to like temper and mold your own chocolate, because they didn't for obvious reasons, with thousands of people there, they weren't handing out chocolate samples. But I was curious how the chocolate tastes.
Yeah, I would hope that they would have many options, or you could use any chocolate, like you're saying, right? Like I want to, I don't want to be printing milk chocolate. Like that would be what a waste.
Well, so they definitely had dark, light, and milk, and white chocolate, just cocoa butter or whatever.
Sure.
You could do multiple colors too. So you could do like a base with one thing and then do the next layer in white, and it would let you switch and pause. So you could do for logoing purposes, I assume.
Now, if you could mix in like some food coloring, you could make your dark chocolate look like milk chocolate, and then give someone a really pleasant surprise when they bite into it, expecting garbage and finding it was perfect, delightful chocolate.
I didn't expect the chocolate snobbery from you, Wes, but I'm here for it. The Struder, that's with the umlaut U, and this was a prototype. This was a guy who has like a real day job, and he just does this for fun because he saw those old, like I don't know if you remember the 3Doodler, but it was like a 3D printing pen that
I don't know how I feel about that name.
What, you don't want to talk about your doodler?
I looked at a picture of this, and it sort of looks like a soldering iron for 3D printing.
Yeah, so it has like a heating element. It has a power source and a heating element on a power source in a box that connects with a feed tube and a wire to it's like a big soldering iron. It has a button on it and a hot end. But the neat thing is it has a rack on the back that you can just put a normal spool of filament on and feed as much filament as you want into the extruder. And you just hit the button and it just rolls out. And like my daughter was like, "Can I try that?" And I was like, "Yeah, you can try whatever you want. This is Maker Faire. Go nuts." And she sat down and just started drawing and made like a little cube in like 10 minutes while I was talking to this guy.
That's pretty awesome. Anything that brings down that level of, because 3D printing is still pretty complicated, right? Even when you're buying a high end machine. So, or at least it's not as like intuitive and immediate as drawing something.
Yeah. Well,
cool idea.
And so his point was the doodler was a neat idea, but they kind of electric razored it. I mean, they kind of did razor marketing for it. So the filament
cartridges.
The filament was a non-standard size. So in order to use it, you had to buy these sticks from them. And because the sticks were only good for like 2/3 of it before you ran out of room to feed, you'd waste like 2/3 of your filament. And also you had to keep buying filament from them. And the markup on the filament was like 15-16x. So it was really like where a 1 kilogram spool of filament is like $10. For them, it was crazy expensive. And he said you could use whatever filament you want, but he was doing PLA there. And so he's deciding if he's going to do a Kickstarter or what with that. But I thought it was really cool. It was a neat project.
Yeah. It feels like that could be like, this could be 3D printing for kids, or 3D making for kids.
Well, so there were a couple of cosplayers there when I was when we were getting the demo who were like, I would love to have this just to touch up prints and to like add different color elements on top of things, because you can kind of just smush it on and it works. So
way more portable too, right? You can take this thing with you to a convention or something.
This is a little bigger than that probably, but because it has the spool of filament on it. It was something you'd put on it's like a big soldering station basically. Anyway.
Okay.
We played Reef Race, which is basically these people had these they're like vertical circle mazes that you put a ball in the top and you have to make the ball come out the bottom.
And you like rotate them, is that right?
And they had like a big wheel that you turn to rotate the maze from across the way using like a series of like linkages. But it felt like you were playing Survivor. Like it was like, you watch Survivor and Jeff Probst is like, okay, do your thing, go. It was very much like that. So my wife and daughter were competing against each other. It was really fun.
I was looking at this and I was thinking these folks really need to do like a crossover with Jelly's Marble Runs. Are you familiar with the Jelly's channel on YouTube?
No.
One of the great YouTube channels. Jelly's Marble Runs. I found out about it through Last Week Tonight, the John Oliver show a few years ago, because they sponsored like a season of it. It's this guy, he's in Europe somewhere, I forget where, whose thing is just marbles, and he designs these insanely elaborate race courses for marbles. And then they just send like 20 marbles down it, and they commentate it completely seriously, like it's an Olympic event.
Oh, this
basically.
is brilliant.
Yeah, it's real fun.
I love the internet.
If you like marbles rolling downhill, you will love this, because it is the ultimate form of that idea.
Who doesn't? Okay, so the electric hot dog derby. This is the stupidest good thing I saw. Imagine a Pinewood derby track, and this was like a high school kid and his dad, I think, did it, is my guess. I didn't talk to them for long, but they built these little cars. You put a hot dog in it. It has electrodes on either end that go into the hot dog, and you run it down a track that has copper lining on the side, and they put I assume a fair amount of charge into the track.
Oh yeah,
because the hot dog starts raw and finishes cooked, and it's like a 15-foot long track.
Will, are you familiar with the hot dogger?
Oh yeah, is the hot dogger the toaster of the toaster that you put the hot dogs in and the buns in, and then you make a grease fire in the bottom?
I think that's a pretty fair description. The one that I've used does not have space for buns, but it is a 1960s, 70s era device that is basically a hunk of plastic with what looks like a metal torture device inside it. They're just like big metal prongs, and you put the hot dogs, you puncture each end of the hot dog onto the prongs so that they're sort of like curved upward in an arc. And then you plug the thing in, and it uses the hot dogs as the, connection to just run raw, like just take that power straight out of the wall and run it through the hot dog. And in about 30 seconds, they get, it starts steaming up in there, and then the hot dogs start to kind of split apart. And it is a horrific device. But I bought one as a I guess you'd call it a gag gift for a friend who really likes hot dogs. And we plugged it in, and we were like, we should maybe have a fire extinguisher on hand, because we don't know how this thing is going to go.
Yeah, that seems scary.
And it cooked the hot dogs, and they tasted terrible.
Oh,
not a recommended hot dog cooking method. I would say boil before even using a hot dogger. Look it up on YouTube, because it is horrifying.
I assume when you were describing how this worked, I assumed this was something from like the 50s or the 20s that like had just carried forward and not an actual product you could buy today. So
can you still buy it today?
I don't know. I'm sure
the one I bought was like, I bought it at a flea market. Yeah. At an antique store. It was from the 70s for sure. I doubt the Presto hot dogger is still around today.
Oh yeah, but, no, I don't see it anymore.
It looks super dangerous. I don't know. Like you're just running raw current through those dogs.
It's basically up there, like right below the lawn dart in terms of shit that will kill you.
So I'm amazed that someone did basically this exact thing, but in race car form at Maker Faire. It's pretty awesome.
Like this is the beautiful thing about Maker Faire, right? Is like there's no Consumer Product Safety Commission at Maker Faire. Like you can do what you want, man.
Did anyone eat the hot dogs after the race?
I did not ask to eat the hot dogs, but I did. I did ask them what their ketchup versus mustard rule was, and they were like, "This is not a ketchup race."
Got it. So good to know.
The Fernside Dragons was the next thing we saw. This is a DIY inflatable costuming community. So like those, like the inflatable dinosaur costume that you see on Halloween where the head's bobbing around, your arms are sticking out the arms, and it looks like a T-Rex.
Or like the big Santa people put in their yard at Christmas. Yeah.
These people teach you how to make those, which I did not think was an option. Having looked at a bunch of these, apparently you just have to be able to sew the kind of structured nylon. We talked about how they come up with patterns, because they had a bunch of really good ones. They had they had an Elmo. They had made some Among Us ones, which I guess now you can buy from China, but whatever. They also had like Wavy Tube Man, Grover, and Elmos, which were really funny. We had a bunch of other ones. Mostly were costumes, but some that were just decorations. They had a Nyan Cat. They had some other stuff. But the way they started out to figure out the patterns was they would buy the stuffed animal for the design they want, and they would disassemble the stuffed animal, trace and scan the structure of the pattern of the stuffed animal, and then just scale it up and laser cut the nylon and sew the nylon, and it just worked.
That's very smart.
And I was like,
I
that
looked
is
on
rad.
their website, because I'm like, I'm not super into the dragon thing. But then I looked on their Instagram, and the first picture on there currently is the little prince from Katamari with a Katamari.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes.
Love it.
I was going to say that was the thing that I was like, oh, fuck yeah. So they had the Katamari was its own thing, and the prince was running around pushing the Katamari. And there's a video of it on their Instagram that's incredible. And that's for Inside Dragons for people who want to look up more about that one.
Love it.
They have a Discord too for people who are into learning more about this, where I joined, and they are very helpful. R2D2 builders are always there. No BB-8s this year, but there was an R5, which was cool. Like a couple of R5 variants.
Who's the bot from Andor? Has anybody built a
B2
Andor
Emo?
bot? Yeah. Has anybody built a good one yet?
I don't know if there's a B2 Emo building scene. I'm sure there is, but I don't know that anybody's gotten one yet. I know that there's a bunch of choppers these days. I think somebody from, I know, is it Mike McMasters or Mike Sen? I can't remember which Mike it is, but one of the mics built the chopper when the Rebels run was going, that they had around the parks, even for Disney. But
maybe after season 2 of Andor, we'll see some B2 emos out there.
It's been almost long enough now. It takes a long time to kind of get everything going. Although I talked to one of the R2 builders, and we were talking about how 3D printing has made it much more accessible, because it used to be that like you'd have to wait until somebody did a machining run to get like domes and stuff like that. And he said now people are even like printing domes and then rub and buff or whatever to get them to be the right amount of shiny. So I thought that was cool.
That's awesome.
Last couple of things. The Chomp Shop is a kid-safe cardboard cutting tool that works kind of like a scroll saw or a bandsaw, but it's like a flat platform, and you can cut cardboard with it. And it's just like a solenoid with a hole punch in it that goes up into a stopper. And the trick is the gap is big enough to put the cardboard in, but not big enough to get a finger into.
Nice.
It was super cool. It was way easier than even using like big giant scissors to cut cardboard. So
did your daughter try this one out?
She did. She cut a heart and a bunch of when I say it's like a scroll saw, you can work the shape into the thing at different angles, the material into the thing at different angles to get exactly like the angles and curves and stuff you wanted. It was nice, clean cuts. So it was really cool.
Cool.
That's I want to say that was a Kickstarter last year under a different name. They had to change their name because of legal things. Their new name is way better than the old name though. So shout out to Chomp Shop. Shout out to Chomp Shop. I'll edit that.
Chomp out to Chomp Shop.
Yeah, it used to be called the Inventables. Inventables, I think is what it used to be called. But it turns out accents are trademark or not trademarkable or something. And then the last person I saw was Jen Schachter, who I used to work with that tested on stuff occasionally. And she was doing some of her little houses. Jen did the Marie. She worked on Project Egress, which was the maker community rebuild of the Apollo exit door. When you can see it at the Air and Space Museum now. In DC, she also worked on the Rosie the Riveter, like a huge giant maker project where everybody submitted a bazillion pieces from around the world to make this giant Rosie the Riveter statue. But she had her little spooky houses there, which I love. She does a lot of cool laser cut stuff.
Right on. Seems like a good group of people at Maker Faire this year.
Yeah, you can find Jen she's on tested videos all the time, but her Instagram is Shack Attack, SCHAC attack _attack. And she's great. Her stuff's really good. So yeah, Maker Faire was good. Wes Fenlon, you know what else was good?
No, I don't, Will. What else was good?
Having an excuse to hang out and talk to you. It's been too long, my friend.
Oh, thank you, Will. It was great to hear about Maker Faire. I have fond memories of the years we went to it together. The New York Maker Faire trips we took, including the one where we walked through New York City as absolute zombies until we saw the movie Dread, and then it revived us.
Look, I'm not going to lie. I fell asleep during Dread because we took a red eye in. Norm was like, that was the year Norm was like, hey, let's take a red eye. It'll be great. We're going to get there. We'll have a whole day to futz around in New York. And then when we got there, our Airbnb wasn't ready until 4 when it was supposed to be ready at noon. And we were like,
yep.
Well, what are we going to do now? We have all this luggage and camera gear and stuff. And didn't we call Russ?
Yeah, my friend Ross Miller, formerly of Engadget and The Verge and that lineage, and he graciously stored our luggage for us at like 6:30 in the morning. But then we had to walk around New York, just exhausted for the next 7 hours or whatever.
Well, I remember it was a lot of luggage too. So thank you, Ross. Again, for 15 years ago, whatever it was. But yeah, we went to see Dread, and we hung out in a park for a while. Then people started looking at us like we might be like Joey was nodding off.
Yep.
And then we went to see Dread because it was quiet and dark and cool. But Maker Faire was great. That Maker Faire was incredible. We met a bunch of cool projects and saw some fantastic people.
Yeah. Great memories of all things Maker Faire. So yeah, thanks for having me on. It was good talking about Windows too.
Always a pleasure. Wes, if people want to find you, where can they find your work?
Well, you can find me at PC Gamer. And also I write a biweekly newsletter about emulation. It's free. I would love it if you subscribe. The website is readonlymemo.com.
And it's like the thing I like about your newsletter is it gives me the stuff that I need to know about what's going on in the emulation scene at any given moment. So
that's the goal. Yeah. And I try to write it for people who do not have time to follow a bunch of, projects, updates on GitHub and that kind of thing. And when I have time, I do interviews with emulator developers and people who do fan translations and, kind of anything around the emulation scene. There's been a lot of news in the past 6 months to a year with Nintendo basically suing one emulator into oblivion and threatening another one into oblivion and all kinds of crazy stuff happening. Yeah, it's been quite a year. Bloodborne is becoming playable on the computer.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's some wild stuff.
I feel like we should talk about this at some point in the future, but we didn't do it this week because it was a little speculative. But do you feel like Nintendo's going to keep going after other emulator makers, or they just go after Yuzu and those guys because they were A, taking money from people, and B, emulating the currently selling console that they sell games to?
I think the short version is the Switch is where their concerns are, and they had a pretty good case against Yuzu for complex reasons. So they were able to go after Yuzu quite effectively. The other one, Ryujinx, I feel like just strong armed the developer, because the developer is in the lead developer of that emulator is in Brazil. They did not sue them, but they apparently either showed up at their house or got in communication with them in some very direct way and made them an offer. And the offer was not, we'll give you a bunch of money. The offer was, to my understanding, was, whatever the Godfather version of an offer is. You got
some real nice legs here. It'd be a pity if something happened to them.
Yeah, so I don't have any insight into the real details of it, but the people around it made it clear they were not bought off and given, a great deal to stop developing the emulator. It was you should stop this or something else, bad is probably gonna come down the pike. And so they chose to stop developing it. But the answer to your question is I don't think they're going to start going after Super Nintendo emulators and that kind of stuff. I think that is that ship has sailed for them. But my guess is the hardware of the Switch 2 is going to be obviously much newer and more powerful than the Switch 1. But I think fundamentally it's going to work quite similarly. And I think those Switch emulators probably would have been able to get Switch 2 games up and running in a not ridiculous timeline, within a year or two. And they probably did not want to see that. That's a
concern. Yeah.
That happened. Yeah.
I mean, I feel like they had from a piracy standpoint, the Switch had a hard road because of the NVIDIA problems with the first, 20 million consoles or whatever they shipped. So yeah. Okay. That's good to hear. For me, I feel like the SNES stuff is probably safe because it seems like Nintendo has benefited from the SNES emulation scene based on how their emulators work. Same thing for N64 even. The thing that worries me is the Dolphin era more than anything, because I feel like the GameCube and Wii stuff is prime they've made commercial HD revamps of Metroid Prime and stuff like that recently.
Yeah.
So it seems like that's a potential commercial target. So I'd hate to see something happen to Dolphin.
Yeah, I don't think it will, but that is a whole complex topic we could get into at some point.
Yeah. Were either of the Switch emulators open, or were they all closed source?
They were both open source.
Oh, so then they're just going to keep getting forked indefinitely, and people start working on them. And
yeah, I mean they've been like doing DMCA's on people who tried to do forks of Yuzu, and I think the fallout was so dramatic that no new, group of skilled open source developers were like, well, we just saw somebody get like sued and their lives ruined. Let's just pick up the torch and continue from there. Right. Like it scared the people who have the skills and the passion in this area are like looking at this as a radioactive thing. Right. Like They're not going to just immediately jump on it. Maybe someday, maybe in 10 years when Nintendo doesn't give a shit about Switch emulation, maybe that there's a case for it getting tons more development. But I think right now, both of those projects are, if someone picks it up, it's going to be someone who's very, it's going to be like a single developer or a very small group of people who are just absolutely fearless.
Or somebody who lives in a country where Charles Martinet can't get to him.
Yeah, exactly.
Wes, it's always a pleasure to see you. Thanks again for coming by. And please go check out his work over at PC Gamer, and also subscribe to Read Only Memo. It's a great newsletter. You'll enjoy it, I promise. This reaches the end of the show, where it's time for me to remind you that this is a listener-supported podcast. We would not be here every week in your ears on Sunday morning without you, the listener. So if you would like to help support the show, you can, you don't want to spend $5. That's fine. I get it. Go to your favorite podcast download service and write a nice review of the show. We'd appreciate that. That helps us a lot. But also $5 helps us a lot too. And for $5, you get access to the fabulous Tech Pod Discord. You get the monthly subscriber only, patron only episode where we talk about kind of whatever's top of mind. It's like sometimes it's projects we're working on. Sometimes it's things that were like not worth a full Tech Pod episode, but we still think are interesting. Sometimes it's cool stuff that people have shown us in the Discord. Like sometimes it's us figuring out how to talk about a topic that's complicated or difficult. It's an interesting show, and we appreciate everybody who supports us. So you can go to patreon.com/techpod, find out how to do that. It's $5 for the Discord and the patron episode. We appreciate everybody so much, and especially appreciate our executive producer tier patrons, including Andrew Slosky, Jordan Lippett, Bunny Fiend, Twinkle Twinkie, David Allen, James Kamek, and Pantheon, makers of the HS3 high-speed 3D printer. That'll do it for us this week. Thanks again to everybody for listening and supporting the show, and thanks to Wes for coming by. It's always a pleasure to see you. And I think Brad will be back next week for the next edition of the Tech Pod. Thanks. See you all next week.